friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Hello Bluebird's Oh Happy Day and the confetti from Cake Time. So I have stamped the images I'll be using on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. So I'm going to start with my fox, and for him I'm using YR12, YR16, and YR18, and I am starting with that YR18 to lay in some shadows down the left side of his body, which is his back. That way I can keep his face nice and light. I did put a little shadow on his muzzle as well though, because it's tipped up. I figured that would be casting a shadow on the front of his face. So I added a little bit there to just help it look pushed back a bit. And then I'm going to blend out the YR18 with the YR16, just making sure to really go over the edge of that YR18 with this lighter shade and pull that into the center so that I don't get any harsh lines. And then I'm also going to do his little tail there. I did put a deeper shadow on the underside of the tail just because it's back behind his body. And then I'm going to use YR12 for my highlight shade and fill in all the rest of him except for the lower part of his face and his belly. And then I also gave him some little white socks on his paws. So sometimes I do use a darker combo for foxes. It's something new that I've been doing by adding in a brown tone, either the E18 or E19. But I wanted to keep this card really nice and bright. It's going to be a children's birthday card. So I decided to stick with this lighter orange combo because it's just going to give me that really vibrant look that I'm going for. I am going to do a second layer on this guy though to increase the depth and saturation of the coloring and also smooth out that blend even more. I talk about this a lot, but it's something that I really recommend doing. It really makes a huge difference with your coloring. So if you've only been doing one layer of coloring and you're not happy with how your blending is looking, definitely give the second layer a try. There's no, rules that say you can't do that, and Copics are perfectly capable of going over your images a second time as long as you're using the correct paper and you're not oversaturating it. So I'm going to keep these shades out and do the goose's beak and feet, and just leaving a little bit of highlight like on the top of the beak and the tips of the feet for the YR12, and then I'll also squeeze all three shades on the bird's beak as well. And then I am going to switch up my colors for some pale browns. I'm using E000 and E00. It's like cream colored shades. And I am going to use that to do the white parts of the fox, especially the transition areas where it goes from the orange to the white, using that E00. And then I'm going to blend that out a bit with the E000. And then I'll also use these on the inside of the bunny's ears and the mouse's ear. And then I am going to switch over to some different browns for the rest of my bunny. I'm going to use E30, E31, and E33. So I'm starting with that E33 and laying in my shadows on the sides of his face and the base of his ears, on the underside of his arms and around the edges of his body, and then a little bit on his feet. I also put a little shading right on his arms under his head where that would be casting a shadow. And then I'm going to blend that out with the E31. I want to create like a little heart shape in the center of his face with white. So I'm going to be really careful how I color this. I'm going to start that with the lightest shade, the E30, and then I'll come back and deepen that up when I get to my second layer. I'm also going to leave a white patch on his belly. So I'm just going to carefully color that in, bringing that color toward the center, but not all the way. And then I'm going to finish coloring the rest of his highlighted areas with that E30, and then I'll grab my colorless blender to kind of push back that E30 where I want it to remain white and just kind of clean up my lines a bit. It's also going to kind of create a transition from that E30 into the white areas. And then I'll come back in with that second layer like I mentioned and bring that color down a little bit more in the shape of that heart that I'm leaving in the center of his face. I'll also deepen up his shadows on the rest of his body and then just bring that color out even further with that E31. I'm going to leave some little white paws on his hands as well, just to kind of make him look a little bit, I don't know, extra cute, gives him a little more personality to, you know, color them up uniquely. So I'm just coming in with my final shade now, that E30, and bringing that in a bit more, and then I will go back to my colorless blender one last time to just clean up any of those edges, like I said. For the goose, I decided to go with some cool grays. I'm using C0, C1, and C3. I want to keep him pretty light because I still want him to look like a white goose. So I'm going to use the C3 for my shadows down the back of his neck, under his hat, on his head, and then also under his wing, and a little bit above the wing and on the tail. And then I'm also going to draw out his little scalloped feathers on his wing even further with that C3. And then I'm blending that out with the C1, and I'll come in with a little bit of the C0 to transition into the white at the belly and also on the higher part of his wing. And then for his second layer, I'm just going to come back in with a little extra of that C3 just to draw those lines out a bit further and, you know, just make his shadows look a little bit more prominent. And then I'm going to move up to my mouse, and I'm going to use E70, E71, and E74. I really like these tones for critters because it's something in between a gray and a brown. It's kind of like a grayish, and I think it just gives them a unique look that you don't see a ton in Copic coloring. So I'm using that E74 to lay in some shadows for him on the right hand side of his body so that I can keep his face nice and light. And I'm blending out with the E71. And then I'll use the E70 for the lightest. I am going to leave a little bit of white on the underside of his face and also on his belly. So I'm just bringing that color forward a bit and then kind of creating that shape that I want to leave with the plain white cardstock. I also did a little layer of that E70 on his tail, and then I'll go back to my colorless blender once again to just bridge the transition between the E70 and the white area. And then I will go in with my second layer on him as well, just deepening up those shadows a little bit and making sure everything is nicely blended so that he looks really furry and, you know, you don't see those harsh lines. I'm also coloring his feet in with one layer of that E70 and then leaving a little tiny bit of white on the tip of his feet. And then I'm going to go back with that colorless blender one more time to just smooth everything out. You can see that kind of just erases the edge of that line. And then I decided to deepen up his tail with a little extra of the E71 and then the E70. So for the bird, I decided to go with a bluebird, and I'm using B21, B23, and B24. So I'm starting with the B24 and doing my shadows for him with that shade. And then I'm going to start to blend that out with the B23. These two shades are really close to each other, so there's not a big transition there, but the B21 is a bit lighter, so it will create, you know, that depth that I'm going for. I'm going to leave a little area on his belly white for now so that I can color that with a contrasting color just to give him a little bit more personality, but you could definitely color him completely blue if you wanted to. So I'm coming in with my second layer now on him, just deepening up those shadows on his wings and the top of his head, the back of his body, and his tail. And then I'm going to just use that colorless blender one more time to just smooth out that line around his belly so that I'm ready to add my next color. And for those, I'm going to use some pale pinks. I'm using R000, R11, and R20, and I'm going to give all of my critters some rosy cheeks. I'll also color in the inside of the ears when necessary and the little bunny's nose. So I just started with the R20 for all of that. It's just a lot easier to do them all at once. I'm also going to use these 3 shades for the bird's belly. So I added a little R20 down at the bottom. And then I'm going to start blending out that R20 with the R11 on the cheeks and the insides of the ears and also the bird's belly. And then I'll come in with a little bit of that R000, which is super pale, and it just really helps give it almost like a hazy look. So the blush looks a little more natural, and also the insides of the ears, it gets like a little bit more of a natural tone as it fades into, you know, the rest of the color that I've put on there. So I finished up the bird's belly, and now I'm ready to start coloring in some of these accessories. So I'm going to go back to my blue combo, but I'm going to darken it up by adding in the B29 and leaving off the B21. So because I have 5 critters, I decided to go with 5 different shades of the accessories. So I'm going to do 1 party hat and then 1 pom-pom on a different party hat with each of the color combos that I'm using, and then also color in some of the confetti images. So I did the mouse's hat and then the little pom-pom on the fox's hat with these blues, and then I'm going to color in some of these confettis. I didn't count how many I stamped out. I just stamped out a whole bunch because I wanted to be able to fill in the scene with these little confettis. So I ended up doing 3 in this darkest blue combo, but after that I start doing only 2 of each shade because I realized that I was going to run out of confetti and not have all the colors combined. So I'm going to just do 2 from now on, and I'm going to switch to some yellows next. I'm using Y13, Y15, and Y17, and I'm going to do the Bluebird's party hat with those. Just putting my shadows on the right and the highlight on the left, and then I'm going to do the bunny's pom-pom, and I flipped the shadows on that. And then I'm going to do 2 more of those little confetti images, which I think are really fun because they really help to fill in a party scene like this one. So once I'm done with the yellow, I'm going to switch up to a hot pink combo and use RV13, RV14, and RV17. So for this combo, I'm going to do the bunny's party hat. Just starting with the RV17 on the right and blending toward the left with the RV14 and then the RV13. Also do the pom-pom on the goose's hat, and then I'll do 2 more of these little confettis, just adding a touch of that RV17 into the creases where it's twisted, and then blending out with the lighter shades to give it a little bit of dimension there. And my RV13 was looking a little leaky, so I just pulled off the other lid to equalize the pressure in the barrel. And then I colored the little air horn from the mouse with that combo as well. And then I'm going to switch up to a red combo. I'm using R24, R29, and R39. And I'm going to do the fox's party hat with this. and put the shadows on the left because his head is tilting back, and the highlight on the front on the right. And then I'll do the pom-pom on the mouse's hat. And I'll do 2 more of the confettis. And this is where I realized that I should not have done 3 of the dark blue confettis because now I'm going to be 1 short for my final combo. So I am going to have to stamp 1 more confetti out just to make it equal because I wanted all 5 of the shades to be represented. So there I've stamped 1 more of those smaller ones, and I'm going to use BG13 and BG15. I originally thought I could get away with just the 2 shades since the areas I was coloring were really small, but there wasn't enough contrast on the confetti for me, so I am going to pull in a 3rd shade once I get to that. And that is going to be BG11. So I'll just add a touch of that to the ends of the confetti to make it look just as dynamic as the rest of them. And then I'm going to grab my black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and get that started over to the side. And I'll go over the eyes of my critters that are open, so everybody except for the bunny. And then I'm going to grab a white Sakura Jelly Roll pen and I'm going to just go over the areas that I went outside of the lines on that 1 red confetti at the top. It's easier than trying to clean it up with the colorless blender since red bleeds a ton. And then I'm also going to add some polka dots to all of my party hats. So this is an extra step, but it just adds a little extra something to the card, gives it a little extra design. And once I'm finished with that, I'm going to trim all of these images out with their coordinating dies. So for my focal panel, I've die cut a piece of Bristol smooth surface cardstock with the new Nesting Decal A2 dies. And I'm going to blend on some Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink in the center. I want it to stay really soft, so I'm using light pressure. I want it to be a little bit darker in the center and then fade toward the edges, but still keep that white area all around the 4 sides. And then I'm going to take some plain water and spritz that onto an acrylic block and pick that up with a paintbrush and tap that off the side so that I get little droplets, and that is going to interact with that Distress Oxide ink and it's going to lift up some of that color. So I'm going to let that soak in for a few seconds and blot it up with a paper towel. And I wanted to add some more droplets, so I'm going to add some more with that water. It's just plain water like I mentioned. And then I will repeat that process, letting it sit and then blotting it up. So you just get a little bit of lifting there with that color. It's not super noticeable on camera because it is such a pale color of ink that I use, but it's more visible in person. And then I also wanted to add some gold splatter, but I wanted it to be subtle as well, as I want the vibrant colors of the images to be what really stands out. So I took some of my Gansai Tambi Starry Colors and splattered that on the background as well. And then I'm going to set this panel off to the side to dry. Next, I have die cut the number 5 from the By the Numbers die set out of some Lawn Fawn Peacock cardstock, and I'm going to blend some Distress Oxide onto that as well. I started with peacock feathers, but it really is almost the identical shade as the peacock cardstock from Lawn Fawn. So I just added a little bit of that, and then I'm going to go in with some Mermaid Lagoon and just tap that right over the bottom area, maybe about halfway up. So I have a nice bit of contrast on there just to make it look a bit more dynamic. And then I blended the transition with the peacock feathers once again. And then I'm going to darken up the bottom once again with some chipped sapphire Distress Oxide ink. And this time I'm only going up about a third. And then I'll blend over that transition area with the Mermaid Lagoon blending tool. And then I will set that aside to dry as well. So now I'm going to work on my sentiment, and I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I'm taking a sentiment from the new birthday script stamp set. I'm doing the one that says enjoy your special day and stamping that in the top left corner. I'm going to stamp that down twice to make sure it is nice and bold. And then I will set that aside, and I'm going to do an insert for the inside of my card. And I'm using Lawn Fawn Merman ink to stamp out 2 more images from the Oh Happy Day stamp set, and then the birthday hugs is from the birthday script stamp set. So I'm going to stamp that down a few times to make sure it's nice and bold, and then I'm going to glue that into the center of my card base. And I'm using a piece of MFT Poppin' Pink cardstock for that to tie into the hot pink that I used in the coloring. And that card wasn't laying as flat as I wanted, so I just grabbed my Lawn Fawn Teflon bone folder to reinforce the crease. And then I've added some foam tape to the back of my focal panel to give it a bit of lift, and that really helps draw the attention to that deckled edge. So I've die cut that number 5 out of some Bristol cardstock as well so that it matches the edges of the background, and I'm going to layer that on top of the, or behind the ink blended one to give it a little bit of a drop shadow. And then I'm going to glue that towards the top of the card just to the right of that sentiment. Before I press that down, I want to glue the fox in place as well because I wanted him to be holding that number 5 and kind of lifting it up into the air. So you could absolutely replace that number 5 with whatever number you want the critters to be holding, but I think it's really fun to have these dies and be able to personalize your birthday cards even more by adding the age of the recipient. So I've laid out the rest of my critters so that I know where I want them to go. I wanted it to look like they're having a little dance party, so that's why I kind of put them in a kind of like an oval shape, kind of going from the top row being the fox and the bunny, and then the rest of the critters down below, and giving them just a little tilt to the left or the right to make it look like they're kind of on one foot and, you know, getting down and having a good time. So I'm going to glue the mouse down, just making sure I have him just where I want him. And then I can start adding in all of these little confetti images to fill in the blank spaces around the card. So I'm just going to start placing them down and try not to put any 2 of the same color right up next to each other. I really want your eye to be pulled around the scene, and so I want to place the various colors, you know, all over. So I'm starting at the top of the scene and kind of filling up the empty space up there, but then I'm going to work my way down, and I even want some of these confettis to be overlapping some of the critters, kind of going in front of their bodies, not in front of their faces or anything like that, but overlapping their bodies so that it looks like the confetti is coming down in front of them and all around them to just make it look, you know, a little bit more celebratory. And like I said earlier, I really do love these little confettis, even though you know, it takes a little bit of effort to die cut them out individually over and over, but I think it's definitely worth it because it just fills in a scene so nicely and just really brings that celebratory atmosphere. So as a final embellishment, I'm going to grab some Stardust stickles and add it to the pom-poms on the tops of all of the party hats. And then I'm also going to add a touch of glitter to all of the little confetti bits, not covering it completely, but mainly just put it in the darkest shadowed areas. Just a little bit here and there to catch the light when you tip it. Just add a little extra fun. So I'm going to hold up that card to the camera so you can see all of the detail and give you another peek at the inside. If you're watching this video the day that it goes live, this is a preview for the August 11th release from Hello Bluebird. So you can check out the blog today for more inspiration from the design team and all of the information about the upcoming release. And I will be back tomorrow with another card for day 3. So if you enjoyed this one, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Ring that notification bell so you're alerted when I post a new video. And thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.